What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another car review. This is of course the 2018 Toyota Tundra. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me with this very cool looking Tundra to review for you guys today. So about the 2018 Tundra, well, this one is the SR5 CrewMax with the TRD Sport package. So this one has, the more aggressive TRD looks to it, which I think looks very cool. But it is still a little bit of a dated style. The Tundra has been around in this generation since it's about 11 years now. And so they did a refresh about 5 years ago, and they are keeping it, nice and fresh here with these cooler looking headlights you see here now. And again, the more aggressive grille and the non-functional scoops you have here on the hood gives a little sportier appearance here for the TRD version. I mean, it still looks good. Truck looks don't change radically from one generation to the next anyway, but it's just a very familiar look, but a good look nonetheless. Coming down to the sides here, it's again just very long here in the CrewMax version, which gives you tons of rear seat room there, but makes for a very large truck on the outside. I mean, this thing is massive, even though dimensionally I think it's a little bit shorter than some of the competition here. But even still, I mean, it's still really big. Going out back there, again, you have the standard short box here on the CrewMax version, and it's a good amount of space there, and a good look in the back. Again, very conservative, but right in line with all the other trucks out there in the segment, and totally fits in for sure. And overall, although it's not a very exciting looking truck, I will say that it's still a good, if conservative, look. Right to the interior of the 2018 Tundra. Well, it's a very truck-like interior for sure. So anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, you have these very large, wide bucket seats you get here in the SR5 package. And so they're the only thing I really noticed about these seats, obviously they're cloth, they're not heated or anything here in this trim, which is a little surprising. I mean, this has a lot of additional packages added on to it, but there isn't any kind of luxury package or anything on this SR5 trim, so it doesn't have heated seats, for example, but again, not a huge deal here with the cloth. But anyway, another thing I noticed about these seats here is just how long the thigh support is. It really goes all the way back to my knees basically here, so it's a very large seat that'll really support longer legs especially really well. And then torso support is very wide, like most trucks, but overall they're still pretty comfortable seats. They do have adjustable lumbar and all that type of stuff, and so overall very comfortable for sure. Next to the steering wheel in the Tundra SR5, which feels a little outdated, and it isn't even leather wrapped. And I mean, yes, we're in a full-size truck, and I know they get expensive, but this truck still starts in this trim at around $40,000, and this one, as tested, is $48,543. And you still don't even have a leather wrapped steering wheel. It's just something that I feel like a lot of the others are including just as a standard thing, or something that's at least in a mid-level trim like this one. And so because of that, it just feels a little cheap. All the buttons and things all feel very dated. That's kind of the whole theme with the Tundra, is it's just very dated as far as the interior goes. It was again revealed about 11 years ago, got a refresh about 5 years ago, and feels about like a 5-year-old interior, I would say still. They did try and upgrade it here and there, and it's got some updates, which I'll get to in a minute. But that's just kind of the feeling here, and that certainly again translates to the steering wheel. But it has a couple of buttons on it here. Now it has the adaptive cruise buttons on it as well, since that's a new addition for 2018, as it now comes standard all Tundras with the Toyota Safety Sense P, which is a nice thing to have. But otherwise, like I said, it's got a pretty good 9-3 grip for the steering wheel, nice little 10-2 notches, and overall, not a bad wheel to use otherwise. Next to the gauges here in the Tundra, which are, pretty good gauges, I gotta say. Again, a little old-fashioned there, just the large analog dials, but I do like that you have, the 4 auxiliary gauges there. Usually you just have fuel and coolant, but to have also, voltage gauge and also another oil gauge there is good to see. And then you have that little color display in the middle there, which is, I think, 4.3 inches, and that's another newer addition here, and does make it, a little bit more modern here. It's the same basic center screen you see in a lot of other Toyotas here. It has all your basic info as far as trip info and fuel economy. It'll also have all the stuff now for the safety systems, and also your typical music and compass and all that type of stuff are all in there. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, right up top you see the infotainment screen, which again in modern trucks compared to all the other competition, this looks pretty small. I think it's maybe like a 6-inch display or something like that. Just on the smaller side. And again, the whole interface is just very dated looking, very similar to Toyota's, again, from like about 5 years ago. My BRZ, which was a 2013 model, had a very similar setup to this. And so, you know, it's okay. It's just, you know, it does all the basics, I guess, which is, I guess, what most truck buyers want. You know, if it's especially a work truck or something, you don't need a lot of bells and whistles. But this one does have the navigation maps there. You also have, of course, Bluetooth audio streaming, USB, satellite radio, all that type of stuff built into there. And I do like how you do have the hard buttons here on the left and on the right. So you know, everything isn't completely you know, capacitive touch or anything. You also have nice large volume and tune knobs, which are also good to see, and also CD player, which is again getting more and more rare these days. And then coming down, you have your climate controls, which are still manual here in the SR5 trim, and you know, but they're large chunky knobs that feel a little cheap, but you know, they have a cool design. And again, they're climate control knobs, they get the job done just fine. And so, you know, overall, you know, pretty simple center stack here, though, you know, very few buttons. As far as storage space, that is certainly a strong suit of the Tundra, like most full-size trucks. First off, in the doors here, you have a huge map pocket with 2 bottle holders in it there, and so a good amount of space there. Coming over to the center, right up top, you have this little rubberized mat. You also will see a sunglasses holder in the ceiling. But coming down here, you'll see this large area that, you know, isn't too deep, but, you know, you can lay some stuff on there. You'll also see a cup holder there, although it's kind of under this whole climate control area, so you couldn't fit a cup that's too big there, but could hold a phone or something like that. That area is where you also find 2 traditional power outlets, as well as a USB jack and an auxiliary jack, but just one USB jack up here. And then coming back, you'll see another 2 cup holders here, which are nicely out of the way of everything, so you could fit all your tall drinks in there. You'll also see another slit here in the sides for whatever you can fit in there. Then you have another little cutout here where I think you would have heated seat controls if you had heated seats, but otherwise you have just another little storage space. And then you come back to the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded with this kind of vinyl material. It doesn't feel very nice, but, you know, again, it is soft, so that's good for resting your elbow on at least. Then another little storage tray in there. And anyway, you open that up, and then you have this massive cubby that, again, you could probably fit, you know, a huge gallon of milk in there easily, maybe even 2 gallons. It's just a huge amount of space there. You also see another traditional power outlet in there. And then up on the top of it here, you'll see a tissue holder, which is, I think, something new, cards, a business card holder, and pen holders as well. So very, you know, convenient. Again, using these as work trucks and, you know, an everyday vehicle. Nice to have all that space, and again, just plenty of storage. Backseat space in the Tundra is excellent here in the CrewMax version. I mean, it's just a huge amount of space. Anyway, I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I easily have about a foot of legroom to spare there, and I have several inches of headroom as well, so I don't think anyone will be able to feel cramped in that back seat. It's really, really massive, and it's a comfortable back seat as well. You know, not a whole lot of adjustability or anything, but those seat bottoms do flip up if you need additional space there on the floor in the back seat there. You also see a fold down center armrest, and then looking forward, you'll see 2 small little air vents. They're really tiny, but at least you do have air vents there in the back, and also another power outlet there. In the doors there in the back, you'll also see another 2 bottle holders, which is really great to see. And so overall, you know, a good amount of space back there. As far as space in the truck bed there, it's, you know, your typical short box, you know, plenty of room, you know, to fit, you know, for most people, although you can get the long bed, I believe, in many of the trim configurations. And you know, that would obviously be a better choice if you want to really, you know, haul long things. But still, you know, your average kind of truck bed doesn't really have any kind of hookups or anything like you see in the Tacoma's truck bed. You know, there aren't any features to it. It does have a soft release tailgate, which is good, although there still isn't any kind of steps built in or anything like that to get into the you know, bed easier. That is one thing that, you know, some of the competition offers. But overall, you know, it's your typical truck bed, and works pretty well. All right, so start up and go for a drive. Another thing that the SR5 trim at least lacks here is keyless entry and push button start. So you still just have your, you know, good old fashioned key here with the buttons on the back. And so anyway, you just slip it into the slot here, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2018 Toyota Tundra TRD Sport SR5 here. So first thing you notice is, again, you're just driving a massive vehicle. You know, I'm sure people that own trucks, so it wouldn't be a huge shock, but anyone who, you know, hasn't been driving a full-size truck, you know, it's definitely an adjustment, because you're sitting up very high. You have a very commanding view of the road for sure. Large windshield that's very easy to see out of, although you do have a pretty thick A-pillar area here. You you know, with this other area around the mirror and things. But again, you're sitting up so high and you have such a large windshield, it doesn't really affect your visibility much. Very good view out of the sides here, and then view out of the back is also really good, of course. Another thing about the Tundra here right off the bat is it has a pretty responsive throttle, you know, that doesn't take a lot of effort in order to get it to go. It certainly feels more responsive than the Tacoma, that's for sure. And so that feels pretty good. Other things to note here, you know, it's a pretty quiet and smooth ride here. Again, we're just at low speeds. This one does have the TRD dual exhaust system, which is optional, which will give this V8 a little bit more rumble here. But yeah, overall, it's still, you know, pretty subdued here at low speeds. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how the acceleration is. Here we go. All right, not bad acceleration. Got a nice little V8 growl here. So the Tundra here has the 5.7 liter V8 engine, the iForce V8 they call it, that does 381 horsepower and 401 pound-feet of torque. And it'll actually get this thing up and going 0 to 60 at about 6.4 seconds. So fairly quick as well. And it felt about that quick. You know, it's running through a 6-speed automatic transmission. So, you know, it's a little bit more spaced out with the gearing. You know, these days with other, you know, modern automatics, we're more used to closely spaced gears, and there's, you know, 8 or 10 gears or whatever. So this to be, you know, only a 6, it means that you kind of have more dramatic jumps between the gears there, but it's still got, you know, plenty of power. And if you don't need this much power, I believe there's also a 4.6 liter V8 engine, which has, I think, like 310 horsepower, and will get a little bit better fuel economy. Although, you know, again, most Tundras still struggle. You know, they all are stuck in the teens as far as fuel economy, so none of them even get over 20. Other things to note here, though, the brakes actually feel pretty responsive so far. You know, it has a little bit of, I guess, a stronger resistance to it, so that you know, it takes a good amount of you know, effort to get them to really engage strongly there, but you know, they work pretty well so far. But other things, you know, just cruising down the road now, a little bit of a higher speed here. Steering is pretty light, but feels fairly accurate. You know, a little vague, you know, but you know, once you're off center, then, you know, you start getting it a little more precise. But on center, it's a little vague. But again, we're talking about a, you know, pickup truck here, so it's not something that I'm expecting to be super dialed in. And so overall, you know, it's a pretty good cruiser whenever you're on good roads. But like most body-on-frame trucks, you know, you do feel every little upset in the road. If there's any kind of bumps or anything like that, it certainly makes itself known. And this one in particular, you know, a lot of the more modern trucks on, you know, newer generation platforms have kind of gotten a lot better. It's smoothing out a lot of that stuff. And even just from my few miles of driving so far, I've noticed that this certainly seems to transmit more of that into the cabin here. But I know I'm crazy, but I'm going to take this full-size truck onto this some tighter corners here and see how it handles. So these weigh somewhere between 5,100 and 5,400 pounds, depending on the trim and everything. And since this is the, you know, larger CrewMax, and it has the short bed, it's probably somewhere in the middle there, but, you know, probably at least 5,200 pounds. And so, I mean, it handles okay though, because with this TRD Sport package, you get Bilstein upgraded shock absorbers, and then you also get TRD anti-sway bars, which, again, we're talking about a vehicle that's over 5,000 pounds and very high off the ground. And, you know, we're on 20-inch wheels, but even those seem pretty small, you know, for a vehicle this big. And so, you know, the handling is decent, again, for a truck. It's not the best handling truck in the segment. You know, I think most of the other trucks, like for example the brand new Ram, you know, is really an impressive handler and really nice and flat. This certainly has some lean to it, and you would have to be pretty brave to want to push one of these things too much around a corner. But again, that's not what they're made for. You know, these things are mostly just straight line cruisers, or, you know, if you are going around corners, you're taking it slow. And so, you know, again, it's a pickup truck, and so I fully expected it to drive about the way it does, you know, but again, not the best handling truck in the segment. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm appreciating about driving the Tundra so far is just that the transmission, one, is responsive to, and it will downshift fairly quickly for me, and the throttle is sharp, you know, for a truck. And again, those are two things that really drove me crazy about the Tacoma, that the Tundra does not have those issues. So not sure why the difference between the two, but I'm glad that at least the Tundra, you know, is much sharper and more eager. It doesn't feel quite as hesitant as the Tacoma did. But yeah, so anyway, thanks to Toyota, I'm gonna have the Tundra here for an entire week, and I'm actually gonna do a little road trip in it as well. And so I'll come back and give you guys my mixed fuel economy, as well as my fuel economy on the road trip and all my other thoughts here on the Tundra. All right, so I've been driving the 2018 Toyota Tundra SR5 CrewMax here for about a week now, and it's a decent truck, you know. I mean, again, we're talking about a platform that's very dated, so of course it's not going to be best in class, not with, you know, some of these other competitors that are brand spanking new here, you know, for the 2018, 2019 model years, and have lots of, you know, higher tech, better improvements, better fuel economy, you know, a more refined ride, all those types of things. You know, the Tundra, just because of its age, is lacking in those departments, and hopefully Toyota does have, you know, a new Tundra in the works. But in the meantime, you know, I mean, this is still a very reliable truck. That's one thing that I think the Tundra can still claim it has over all the other trucks in this segment, and that is reliability. I mean, most of the trucks in this segment are fairly reliable, but I mean, you know, I think it was last year there was the guy who put 1 million miles on one of this generation Tundras, and it was still running great, no issues whatsoever, and it was really, really impressive. So I mean, yeah, there's actually been someone that's done 1 million miles in one of these things and had basically no issues. So that alone speaks volumes, in my opinion. So if you're looking for a very, very reliable truck that you never have to really worry about, this probably takes the cake. But as far as everything else goes, you know, again, it's just lacking because of, again, its age. But a couple of things while I've been driving here that I want to add to the review here. First is, you know, so one of the big improvements here for 2018 is the standard safety tech you now get here. And so it's one of the more basic versions of Toyota's safety sense system. So it doesn't have like lane keeping assist, but it has a lane departure warning. So, you know, all you get is a bunch of, you know, alerts saying, hey, you're leaving the lane, instead of actually helping you. It's a little more basic, but it does still have, you know, the adaptive cruise control, and obviously the automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, and the adaptive cruise is one of, it's not the smoothest adaptive cruise system I've used. You know, there was most of the time it was pretty good, but there were a few times where it slowed down either a little roughly or it slowed down for no reason, and so, you know, again, just not 100% foolproof, but again, this is the first year for the adaptive cruise here in the Tundra, so you know, it's something that I'm sure will get better over time. Another thing that's worth mentioning here is the stereo. Now this stereo, believe it or not, even though it's a pretty dated stereo, it's still a $500 upgrade, at least in the SR5 trim here, and it's really an underpowered system. I mean, it doesn't sound bad once you crank it up, but I mean, you really got to crank it up to get, you know, decent volume out of it. I mean, even just cruising on the highway, if you want a reasonable volume, you're well over the halfway point on the volume knob, you know, and you're almost 2/3 of the way cranked up, you know, just to get good volume out of it. So not the most powerful of systems, but, you know, once you do have it cranked up, it does sound pretty good. Another thing, speaking of sound, is this one has the TRD Exhaust System, which is an $1,100 upgrade to the TRD exhaust, and it does have a really nice sound. This V8 does sound very good, I have to say. And so if you like a little bit of additional sound and grunt with your truck, I would certainly go for that. I think it's well worth it because it doesn't drone. You know, I think the one in the Tacoma is a little more drony with its V6, but this just has a nice low burble. It's never drony, it's never too loud or annoying, but it just gives you a nice little bit of extra volume you otherwise wouldn't get. So I would definitely recommend that. Something that as another rough point here with the Tundra, though, unfortunately, is the fuel economy in the Tundra. So these are rated at 13 in the city, 17 on the highway, for a combined average of 14, which I think is the worst fuel economy in this segment. And as far as my real-world fuel economy, I actually did it slightly better. So I actually managed about 15 miles per gallon in my mixed of city and highway driving. There was a little more highway driving than I usually do, so that helped to bring the average up. But I was still surprised. I thought for sure it wouldn't even meet the combined rating of 14, but it actually surpassed it by 15. Strangely enough, though, I did a little highway road trip of about 380 miles here in the Tundra, and on the way out, there's a lot of elevation changes, windy roads and things like that on the highway, but it was, you know, mostly 70, 75 mile per hour speeds. On the way out, I got actually 17 miles per gallon, so I met the highway estimates. But on the way back, I actually only managed 15 miles per gallon on the highway. So that's, you know, not as bad as the city rating, but it's, you know, still 2 mpg lower than the already low highway rating of the Tundra. So that was a little disappointing to get 15 on the way back. But again, we're talking about a truck that's well over 5,000 pounds with a V8. And again, this isn't a high-tech V8. This is still very much similar to the V8 that was in it whenever it was introduced 11 years ago. So, you know, that doesn't help its cause either. And again, I'm just hoping, you know, Toyota has a lot of great new efficiency solutions with their very thermally efficient engines and things like that. So I'm hoping that there are some enhancements, again, down the road for the Tundra. But in the meantime, its fuel economy suffers, and that's just the way it is. The last thing I want to mention here is the pricing of the 2018 Tundra. So these SR5 CrewMaxes start at $39,500, and then whenever you go up to this one as tested, which has the SR5 upgrade package with a larger fuel tank and the upgraded stereo system, and then all the TRD upgrades that I mentioned earlier, like the sway bars and the Bilstein struts and the exhaust and all that kind of stuff. This one ends up being $48,500 roughly, and so, you know, it's still at that price. It's kind of tough to justify still, again, considering how much more you get with a lot of the competitors these days for the same money. And it's, again, you know, it's just behind, and there's really no other way to put it with a Tundra. Again, it's still a very rugged, reliable, great truck, you know, but just compared with everything else that's, you know, progressed, and this hasn't really progressed and kept up with the rest. But, you know, like I said, if reliability is paramount to you above everything else, I think this is still an excellent choice. And it still is a very good truck. Again, just because it's older doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you don't have as much, you know, toys and as much tech and all that type of stuff like you get in some of the others, therefore making the price harder to justify. But it still is a very good truck, not to discount it at all. But anyway, huge thanks once again to Toyota for providing me with the Tundra here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the Tundra in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.